Do I need to go there?
Yeah, you can do it from here. Sure, whenever.
Hi guys, can you guys hear me okay? I presume I can hear myself. Welcome all. First of all, I'm Rebecca Harvey, Director of School of Art, and I'm thrilled to welcome you here tonight. The Dean of the College of Fine Arts, Seth Beckman, wished to be in attendance tonight, but was called out of town, and he sent us more cards. So, Ball State School of Art is pleased to welcome the artists Nick Payne and Bob Faust tonight for our College of Fine Arts Series event. The Arts Alive series recognizes the importance of experiencing the vastness of all the arts have to offer through diversity and inclusion. Nick Cave is an artist, educator, and foremost a messenger, working between the visual and performing arts through a wide range of mediums, including sculpture, installation, video, sound, and performance. Cave is well known for his sound suits, sculptural forms based on the scale of his body, an initiative created in direct response to the police beating of Rodney King in 1991. Sound suits camouflage the body, mask and create a second skin that conceals race, gender, and class, forcing the viewer to look without judgment. They serve as a visual embodiment of social justice that represent both brutality and empowerment. Throughout his practice, Cave has created spaces of memorial through combining found historical objects with contemporary dialogues on gun violence and death, underscoring the anxiety of severe trauma brought on by catastrophic loss. Cave encourages a profound and compassionate analysis of violence and its effects as the path towards the ultimate metamorphosis. While Cave's works are rooted in our current societal movement, when progress on issues of global warming, racism, and gun violence, both in the hands of citizens and law enforcement, seem maddeningly stalled, he asks how we may reposition ourselves to recognize the issue, come together on a global scale, instigate change, and ultimately heal. Described as part artist, part designer, and part mediator, Bob Faust is the principal and creative director for Faust, the Chicago-based design studio, with a focus on cultural branding. He is also the professional and personal partner of artist Nick Cave, who together founded a multi-use creative space called Facility. As an entity, it believes that art and design can create peace, build power, and change the world. That by fostering an environment and community built from your dreams, you'll wake up daily within your destiny. So Nick's exhibition, titled For Other More, will be at the Museum of Contemporary Art Chicago from May 14th to October 2nd. And lastly, I wanted to let you know that after you're invited to join us for a catered reception by Sea Salt and Cinnamon afterwards in the lobby. So we're going to open the lecture with this reading of Nick and Bob from the fabulous Art 21 PBS series. And without further ado, applause please, I need Nick Cave and Bob Faust.
This place of dreaming within my work really is the place that I find that I exist in most of the time. You know, it's just this sort of amazing state of mind. It is about dreaming for the audience, but I've got to be able to set up those parameters. What do I need to sort of put in place to allow you to dream? I'm based in Chicago. For me, it's an amazing place to be because I can focus. I can have the type of studio that I need. I can introduce a new project here, and there is a network of people that I know here that can help sort of inform and build my work. So it really becomes this interesting sort of laboratory for me. The first sound suit was in '92 in response to the Rodney King incident, the LA riots. I was sitting in the park one day and just sort of thinking about what does it feel like to be discarded, dismissed, profiled. There was this twig on the ground, and I looked at that twig as something discarded. And then I proceeded to just start collecting the twigs in the park. And I brought them all back to the studio, and then I started to build this sculpture.
I would watch this one.
I started to realize that the moment I started to move in it, it made sound. Then it just literally put everything in perspective. I was building this suit of armor, something that I could shield myself from the world and society. And so out of that came this sculpture, performative kind of work. I think after the first sound suit, I had a different approach to art making, and I realized that I was an artist with a conscience. The moment I did was the moment that my life literally turned upside down.
Sit down and then refresh.
I think it's just me kind of experimenting. It's like, a scientist exploring alternative ideas. How's it look? Oh my God, it looks amazing. I want it to be not necessarily something that is defined. Like with the sound suit, I don't draw any of them. If there's areas that are like bad, like put a yellow pen. Okay. I work hard, but I'm one single individual. It was just too much. And so I had to hire 3 full-time assistants. Now there's, 10 studio assistants that are regular full-time assistants. They're all artists, which is great.
I got just the end left. So just, maybe 2.5 square feet, so it's about 2 days. Should be done, Thursday, I think.
If I'm coming up with a new concept for a sound suit, I tend to always do the first one myself. It's very meditative for me. I can do it for hours on end. I just need a little bit more. It's all really based on one object that becomes the instigator. That's how sound suit is built. It's built on me sort of identifying an object and then me taking that object and relocating it on and around the body. And then that begins this sort of journey. We need metal flowers.
A lot of metal flowers.
We just did a road trip looking for materials for the body of work that I'm working on currently. Let's go back here. Look at all the silver. I need to start collecting that. I find that when it comes to looking for supplies for my work, I am at the flea markets, the antique malls, looking for something that may spark a new direction.
There's a lot of ducks.
No ducks.
No ducks.
I don't have a list ever. I may not know how I'm gonna use it right at the moment, but it all eventually sort of comes back around and enters the work at some point. I'm finding that I'm building work as we're antiquing right on the spot. I may build an entire piece because I will find X here, and then I'll say, okay, I need to find this to go with X. All of this kind of stuff is nostalgic. It's this place that we want to sort of remember. One day I just started buying these ceramic birds, but you know, I bought them because in my upbringing, that was what was considered precious art. You know, was kept in this china cabinet. And that was my way of staying connected to my grandparents as they were getting older. And it was my way of honoring and sort of celebrating how they influenced my upbringing and my life. So part of the work is really about the sense of honor in the celebratory kind of way that the sound suits are fantastic, fantastical. I love the colors in this. I'm very much interested in being able to create these concepts that I can immerse myself in. Cranbrook Art Museum really became the core of this immersive experience. From that core were these satellite experiences that were built around performance activity.
More trotting, more personality, more character, yeah? More energy, more energy, more energy. There can never be enough energy.
One of the performances at Cranbrook was really working with the Detroit School of Arts, which is a public high school. I think dance has always been a real critical part of my practice. The sound sets are really broken up into two bodies of work. One is sculptural work, and that's sort of the static work that, you know, you see in the museums. And then there's this sort of performance sound suits. When producing a project of that scale, all of these components and parts and elements, it's like building a collage. I think by the end of the project, probably over 500 people were involved in some aspect of the performance. That's what we were interested in making happen in Detroit. How do we get people out of their communities and engaged with the arts? Trayvon Martin is a new work that was shown at Cranbrook. It's made up of a black mannequin dressed in a hoodie and sneakers and jeans, and then surrounding its body is these plastic blow molds, which are like, sometimes at Halloween, there are these plastic forms that are set out in yards. And so they are surrounding sort of figure almost as guardians. But then over top of the entire structure is this web that's constructed out of pony beads. So from a distance, it looks like this amazing sort of gold sculptural form until you get up close and you realize that there's someone trapped inside. It's very, very disturbing what's going on right now politically within the Black community, not only Chicago, but around the country, what's going on with police brutality and these unarmed Black men that are being killed. I mean, it just goes on and on. You know, I think at the end of the day, it's me giving back to the community and being the sort of change agent. I want to change our way of engaging with one another. I want to use art as a form of diplomacy. That's why I'm in the state of urgency right now. I don't know, I just feel so unsettled. I'm doing what I'm doing, but I'm not sure if it's happening fast enough.
Well, thank you for sharing that, you guys. That was a great start. And the reason we wanted to share that video at the front of this was to make sure everybody had a good understanding of the breadth of Nick's practice. I'm Bob Faust. I'm Nick's Special Projects Director, artist and a designer, and this is Nick Cave.
Hi.
Thanks for having us. Nick, I want to first and foremost tell you that this is going to be a little bit of a different conversation. This is the first time I've ever been in this side of the conversation, actually interviewing Nick. So let's make this as real as we possibly can. Can I offer you a room temperature water?
Indeed.
Well, anyway, what we're hoping to do here today is to share your story of how you found the arts as your path, and then share some of the key steps that got you to this point. I just kind of felt like that might be the best kind of content to share with this particular audience. And because I know you for such a long time, and I'm, you know, familiar and know and love your family as well, I know that you were a creative kid. But can you tell us when you knew that creativity would be channeled into an actual career? Was there an aha moment that made it clear?
You know, I don't know if there was a aha moment. I think that, I think what was amazing is, you know, when your parents just sort of give you that sort of space or permission to sort of be who you need to be. And so I've always been a maker, I've always drawn, I've always painted. So it was really just sort of having that sort of space, that allowance to sort of be creative. And I think, you know, once I decided to go to, you know, I was creative in high school. I was, you know, involved in like the art club. So I knew that this was a space that I was comfortable in and that I was interested in. And it was, you know, my high school teacher that sort of directed me to look at the Kansas City Art Institute as where I got my undergraduate degree. So that's sort of was the beginning of someone sort of looking at, you know, my ability and saying that I think you should consider going to art school. You know, when I told my parents, they were like, okay, not knowing what that meant, nor did I, but I knew that that's what I needed to do.
That's where I wanted to go from there. So your teacher kind of gave you the permission to think about that as an actual path. And then you made that choice to go to the Kansas City Art Institute, but then you're still left with another big choice. Like, what do I do when I get there? And I've never heard you talk about this part of it. And what I was hoping to get from you is like, when you got there, I know your brother was there too, but was there like a North Star that you were working toward, or did you just kind of set yourself in there and then flow with what was coming your way and take advantage of what the school offered? Like, how did That's 4 years. How did you shape that 4 years?
Well, I think the first and foremost, the most important thing is I was independent at that moment, out of the house, like on my own. And I knew that it was my responsibility to get up and get to class and all of these sort of things. So it was sort of like, you just sort of know that.
Mhm.
But I was at an art institute, so it was a school that was surrounded by 400 creative individuals. And so that were like committed to this sort of practice of sort. And so I was very much eyes wide open, sort of exploring many different sort of areas within the arts. Also connected myself, dance was very important to me, so I connected myself to the University of Kansas City, which had an affiliated Alvin Ailey program. So that's how dance continued to be part of my practice. And I was interested in, that as another medium to fold into my work. And then I found myself as I was in undergrad, that I found myself more comfortable in the sort of fiber sort of part of the program. I felt more grounded there as I was taking sort of elective classes, and then decided to then really sort of focus in that area. And that's where, I started to focus on screen printing. That then led me, I'm producing these fabrics. Well, what am I going to do with them? Which then led me to to learn how to sew.
Yeah.
And then, I was able to make things for the body. And so that then led to performance. So, and then, it was all about spectacles and sort of parading and creating these sort of events, basically out in the public realm.
That's so interesting because like, you described that story as like one thing led to another, led to another, led to another, and it all just kind of unfolded like, and you took advantage of opportunity. But I know that there's always a vision towards something. And so like you described printing fabric as what led to needing to make something out of that fabric. But there had to be like that spectacle at the far end or at the initial bit.
I don't know. It's like you take a screen printing class and then your instructor says you've got to make something out of it. And so you're like, oh, okay, let me see. And so then I made something to wear. And so, it's always some instigator that's sort of giving a directive in some sort of aspect that opens up, another sort of door that I can sort of move through. And so, it was really sort of being responsible and committed to that, and understanding my ability and skill sets, and and just being sort of a responsible student. I was very sort of there, yes, I partied a lot, but I was also in class every day when I needed to be. So
I also know that you've used your art toward commercial pursuits, like at the beginning and even at Kansas City, like doing window display and fashion design and retail. When and how did you know that you were destined to teach and ultimately be an artist with a capital A? Because I think a lot of times that seems unattainable. And so people pursue all different ways. And there had to be also a moment that you believed enough in yourself that you were going to keep pushing through like more and more experiments.
Well, I think undergrad, once I graduated, it was a group of us and we were all going to go to New York together, and they all went and I couldn't go because I couldn't afford to go. So I was like stuck in Kansas City by myself. Okay. And so, but, I also sort of maintained a studio practice within my sort of house. So like my living room became the studio. Then I sort of connected with a group of artists that also graduated. And so we would like sort of, it was maybe a group of 8 of us. And so we would sort of move, every week we would be at someone else's studio space critiquing their work. So you found that you had 2 months to sort of create work before it came around to you. And so it was a potluck kind of thing. And so that was my sort of way of staying connected to my practice. And then I sort of needed a job. And so, but I knew that I couldn't go into corporate America because that is not my thing. And so I had to sort of figure that out. And so I was, applied to Macy's as a visual director, and literally was hired. Display, and I was hired right away. Based on my portfolio. That lasted for 2 years until I decided to go to grad school.
Okay.
And so then I went to Cranbrook for my graduate studies. I went to North Texas State first because I wanted to continue to work with one of my professors that transferred there, which was a university setting, which was like awful.
Didn't fit you.
It just didn't fit me. I was like, they had amazing studios there for the art program, but I found myself always alone in this massive building. And so then my professor from Cranbrook came to North Texas to do a lecture and studio visit, and came to my studio there and said, I think you need to be at Cranbrook. And I said, I can't afford to go there. And he said, let me see what I can do. And then I was able to go there on a full scholarship. And so that's how I got to Cranbrook.
It really is a series of like recognizing the pathways that open up.
Yeah, and just sort of connections and someone seeing, I think, your potential and that, that you would be better suited here.
Yeah.
And so that was really sort of fabulous. And so I went to Cranbrook, was there. It's a 2-year program. Again, just, grad school, undergrad, it's all in or it's nothing. I mean, you have a choice to make here. And so I really worked really, really hard. It was tough. Failures like weekly, but I got back up and got back in it. And I think that that's important to understand that, failures are really sort of part of the experimentation and the sort of development. And so that was really, really important.
How often does the uncomfortable part of that failure actually turn into something that is like the impetus for something great? How often does that happen?
I don't know if I did anything great there. I just did my work and was, there for critique and sort of presented it to the audience. And, you just sort of you're constantly sort of exploring and testing and questioning your thoughts and your ideas. And so I think that is the most important thing, that it's you're always doing that. Even today, I'm doing that exact same thing. And so then when it came around to thesis, I had completed my thesis probably 2 weeks prior to the thesis show. One day, and I realized I didn't like it, so I threw it in the trash and made something else. So that was sort of like, how I would sort of, I'm just risking it all. And my former classmates are like, oh my God, are you kidding me? You're gonna do a whole nother thesis. And I wasn't happy with I didn't want that to be the conclusion. And so I made a new body of work, and then that was my thesis. And then my closing sort of meeting with my professor, he said,
we had a conversation. He said, oh, by the way, you've got a teaching position at the School of the Art Institute in Chicago. So that's really why I'm in Chicago.
I swear, there's like a series of angels that are like following you down this path. But that's amazing. I'm gonna actually open up a deck and share a deck as we start to move into like more professional practice stuff. Okay, y'all can see that. So when you first started making art outside of school, this is an example of a really early work that is actually going to be in the MCA show. But I wanted to bring it up here because oftentimes these talks start with the very first sound suit, which is a really important thing. But you had been making work before that in a period of life that was before you felt like the art world knew and loved you. And so I thought that this was a nice example to pull up and talk about why this, where did it come from? How was this a bridge from grad school work to later work that we're more familiar with?
Well, I think that, we never know what's going to sort of affect us. And this piece titled Trust is a piece that's in response to when I lost my youngest brother. And that was maybe three years after grad school. And so I found myself sort of one day, just sort of, as I was out running errands or walking to school or what have you, collecting these gloves off the streets. And so I was collecting these gloves and was casting them in resin. And it was really sort of thinking about sort of preservation and holding on to something and looking at the imperfections of something and understanding that even in the imperfections, there's beauty. And so I started collecting these gloves and started to build this sort of library of these sort of specimens that over a period of time.
Wow. And what was your art career like during this time? Like, how were you actually getting work out to the world? This is before you're represented by a gallery.
Yeah, I was like a gypsy.
A gypsy.
I was like I was hustling, like, oh my God. I was not committed to any gallery, but I was committed to shows. I would, there's all types of ways to sort of find avenues to sort of showcase and present your work. And so I was always very much on top of that and found myself sort of in group shows and really sort of building my sort of visibility that way first, but never committed to a gallery right away. Was just sort of really sort of in these group shows and trying to understand the dynamics of that, trying to understand the art community within a city structure, and just sort of connecting and being sort of present and part of that world.
Okay. And so this is the first sense, or usually where stories start. And I wonder if you can talk just a little bit about this, because I already heard, as you were describing Trust, so much overlap in those two stories.
Well, the interesting thing about this, the Rodney King, which was 92? Yeah, I think 92. And this is, I had first just had taken the position at the School of the Art Institute. This happened also around that same sort of time. And, this is the first time that we were able to have video of this kind of violence toward a person of color. And so it was really troubling for me. And the interesting thing that it sort of did was, I thought I was living in the world with a consciousness, and this incident woke me up in a way that I had never been awakened before.
Mhm.
And it sort of was the beginning of a real critical shift in my practice. Uh, I was now sort of very connected to a different way of existing and in the art world. I, regardless if I knew it or not, I all of a sudden had something to say.
Mm.
Uh, and didn't know that I had art as a means of expressing that. And so it really sort of opened up this sort of way of working that was very new to me. When I was reading about Rodney King and this incident, and I was really interested in how they described him. It was like larger than life, worked out with prison weights, scary. And I just was trying to imagine, like, what does that look like in terms of an image? And at the same time, I was thinking about like being profiled, and that could very well be me, and just sort of struggling with these sort of this sort of moment in time in history, and was didn't understand that feeling of feeling sort of less than, discarded. And I was in the park sitting on a bench and looked down on the ground, and there was this twig. And that was the catalyst for building this sound suit, was looking at this object that had no value and was dismissed. And I started to collect all the twigs, brought them back to my studio, and started then to build this sculpture piece. Didn't even think that I was building a garment of sorts. It didn't even dawn on me until it was done. And then I put it on, I could wear it, and then I moved in it and it made sound. And so that's how sound was originated. And that moment that I made sound was a moment of protest. And so, again, just sort of understanding the power within the work, within the object, and being open to what it's presenting to you, to me, and which then led to a much more of a dynamic sort of understanding of the work. But, when this piece was introduced to me, I knew my life was going to change in that moment. I don't know why, but it was bigger than life. It had this incredible sort of power that I wasn't familiar with.
It made you uncomfortable.
And it made me uncomfortable. It made me sort of question what I was doing, but I knew that I was on to something. And so I built a series of these sound suits, but I didn't show them for about a decade.
This was never shown?
This was never shown. Because I wasn't quite ready. I didn't quite understand the magnitude of the work. The fact that, my body was now employed to support the work. It was all these new sort of things about the practice that I had no intention arriving to, but it was presenting all of these sort of options. And so for me, I needed to gave myself time to understand what was in front of me. And
that was about a decade.
That was about a decade. And I was just like working and built probably about a dozen. And then I had photographed the work, and then I used that sort of bodywork portfolio and started to scout. And
For
found
galleries.
spaces and galleries to show it.
Okay. And all in the meantime, you were teaching every day and
Yeah.
still running your life in that manner.
Yeah, and in the meantime, teaching and trying to understand what that meant to be a teacher and what the demands were around that. What was my sort of, understanding in terms of relationships with student body and academia altogether. So it was all very, very new.
Mhm. That's about when I started to enter the picture.
Oh, okay.
And it is never. So this is when I entered the picture, and I thought it's an opportunity for us to start talking about the importance of collaboration for you. And so I'll just start with a real quick story about our start. And that was when I went to your house for a sale of garments. You were making sweaters at the time. And I went there and I was trying on your sweaters. And I knew that coming into someone's home to buy something handmade from them, I had to leave with something. And I was uncomfortable with them because at the time I was a pretty conservative young person and they were kind of crazy sweaters, for lack of a better term.
Were they?
Yeah, not so easy to wear sweaters. And anyway, I tried one on because I knew I had to leave with something, but you came in with a whole stack of them, which started a conversation in a very comfortable way. Try this on, and all in that 15, 20 minutes of trying things on, we started to have a conversation about what do you do? What do you do? And I was able to tell you I was a designer, and you were able to say, I've got my first big solo show that actually has a publication that goes along with it. And the sweater was expensive, right? And that was an opportunity for us to say, how about a trade? And so the next day you came to my studio and I was able to show you what kind of work I made. And we were both real interested in how each other worked. But the coolest thing about the project was that Nick gave me a prompt for this book, this catalog, that it needed to be an object. And as a designer, that's the coolest prompt I have ever been given, because usually the prompt is very specific about it needs to house 4 essays and the images need to look this way and be in this order. And this was more like, here's what I've got. Here's my opportunity. Let's make something cool together. And so we made this book, and this is one book with 4 different covers. None of it is bound together. And if you were to open this up, all the pages come apart and can be reassembled in any way. And the idea behind that was just that it was another way to talk about how you assemble work from various source materials and bring them together to make a new thing. But my question to you is, that's the inside of it. And this goes back to it's not a story about me. This is more a story about collaborators. But why did you trust me? Why do you trust other people to make work with you? That's got to be a really hard thing, to be vulnerable like that, because you're not overly directing stuff. There's tons of me in this. There's tons of other people's work, studio assistants work and things.
Well, I think first and foremost, the work has to be there. And I have to feel secure about that. But it takes a community. It takes a sort of a body of creatives to sort of expand on one's vision. I can't design a book. I don't know how to do that. You do. And so again, this is an opportunity for you. And based on your work, I understood and liked the sensibility that was there. And so that was important to me, that I felt comfortable with you, but I wanted to also give you agency to sort of take this and reimagine. How do you make an object that also functions as a book, that also sort of supports the work?
So does that kind of connect to your teaching as well?
And that, yes, it connects to my teaching, but it's, again, I have to sort of be open to all of that. And I think as a collaborator, I have my lane, the collaborators each have theirs, and it's a dance, it's a relationship, it's a partnership. And so all of that is sort of um, paid close attention to, and in order for it to work, I have expectations that are extremely high. Hopefully the collaborator does as well. And so we then sort of work and communicate and arrive at this amazing place with great results. So
Yeah, so speaking of, you said it's a dance, I have a few more slides that are an opportunity to talk about who and what it takes to make work, specifically for this audience to understand that while you may be studying art in a specific kind at this moment, there are just so many pathways once you're out of school to go with that. In order to do anything, we've got fabricators and performers and designers and writers and curators and sponsors and gallerists, and the list just goes on and on. And so I pulled a couple images that maybe we can just talk specifically about what it took to get there. And this one is a performance that was done in Shreveport, Louisiana, called As Is. And I'll start and then let you go from there. But the amount of people it took to put this together was kind of epic. It took place over the course of a year. In fact, I believe that the process of putting this performance together is the project, and the performance itself is just a really wonderful manifestation at the end that we get to share with other people. But it was the making of this that is the artwork in my mind. And we worked with 4 different social service agencies, each of them having 20 to 50 different people who participated either in conceptualizing or words or movement. And then we had you making the work and a choreographer making movement with local dancers and local musicians and local animators and a gospel choir to make this thing. That happened one time, one day. And so I guess I told the whole story. But if there's anything that you can add to that.
well, I think, again, I think the most important thing is that most of the performance work, if not all, is, I bring a project to a city and then I hire the city to build the project. So I am in residence with the city, with the community, and sleeves pulled up, boots on the ground, figuring out who lives here, and then sort of through research, pulling together the team, the performers that are needed for the project, and then we go into residence building this work. There's always a vision and a conclusion at the end, but it's really the sort of in between, the process in between of us building out a space and then building the project. I'm fortunate enough to have this sort of platform, but I'm working with individuals that don't necessarily have that kind of platform. And so for me, it's all about what is possible and to be able to create space for one to imagine that and to be a part of that. It's really sort of what it's all about. I know what I have to do in terms of getting there. And so me sort of understanding, if I need a gospel choir, well, I'm going to most likely sort of go to probably and meet with 8 different gospel choir groups until I sort of decide which one I'm interested in working with, as well as dancers. We do an open call. I bring my choreographer with me. And so we do workshops. We do again, to create morale, to sort of make connections, and then it all starts. We start to put together the entire sort of cast.
Yeah.
And then we start to then build the work. So, you know, it takes time. It's a development. It's a trust. But again, it's me with the vision and really sort of being secure with that, being a director, giving directives, and for everyone else to feel comfortable in that sort of space.
Awesome.
So it's great. But, you know, at the end of the day, it's me sort of coming to a city, hiring this community that lives there to build the project.
That's the case with performances specifically.
Yeah, it's really sort of, again, I'm interested in reintroducing a city back to itself in a sense.
This is a little different story, but I put it in here just because that last slide really shows the breadth of what collaboration can be. And I think oftentimes we walk into a museum and we don't realize all the hands that go into that as well. And while you're literally like laying out every square inch of a sound suit, and it is absolutely built from your vision, there are people, studio assistants. Right now, we've got 12 working here that are 20 working here that are literally sewing on the buttons and sewing them on in such a way that they're very directed, like the thread is the right color, the way that the stitches are going is in the direction you want them to go. But they're choosing to be in this space to do that work under your direction, because I think they're also, like you were in school, letting that stuff wash over them so that they can then flow with their own work, because they're all artists in their own right.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they're just feeling that and watching that in this really slow-mo kind of way. But lots of people had hands on this work.
Well, you know, I think when it comes to assistance, you know, it's, you know, there's, you know, you come in and there's a test that you have to sort of complete, and you know, that is sort of directed by my studio manager, and so there's a set of skills and things that one has to sort of do, and you know, based on that sample testing, either you're hard or you're not. You know, it's based, you know, and also like end of the day, how do you leave your workspace? Is it just a disaster, or is it things organized and put in place? So it's a lot of things, but it's really about, it's really skill based at the end of the day. It's just not a studio where we sort of teach you how. And so, because we're like so immersed in so many projects that, you know, I need to work with people that understand the language and can come aboard. But they're all artists, you know, when they have shows, they need time off. I support all of that. I get it, you know. But it's really an amazing sort of group of young people. You know, for the MCA show, I had to bring on an additional 10 assistants for just one part of the project that took a year and 2 months to make. And so again, I'm sort of like laying out the timeline and really understanding what needs to happen and if I need additional sort of support. And so it's all really sort of organized and sort of thought through and planned.
I know we're running out of time because we want to have questions here. So this was just another opportunity for us to talk about more of that. But this is Until that started at Mass Mocha and then traveled to Carriage Works for this iteration here. And then one more, and this goes back to a collaboration between the two of us. And this is last year. And this was because there was so much that needed to be done and said just post the George Floyd murder. And we were trying to find all kinds of ways to activate our communities, specifically the gallery itself. And we had meeting after meeting with the Jack Shaneman Gallery, who definitely wanted to hear your opinion of what they could do. And you said, let's do this whole series of work with all your artists, but this was one that we were able to do together, that they bought the idea. We said, or you said, in one of the meetings, truth be told, and that kind of stuck with all of us. And it was kind of like putting your money where your mouth is kind of moment. And we turned their whole upstate gallery space into this gigantic billboard art piece, which turned into a whole host of other things and conversations that the neighborhood and the business community up there was really angry and trying to get this pulled down, because this was right before the election as well. And so there was all this politics around it, and you could imagine as this started to go up from left to right, the big T, R, U, and each one of those is taking, you know, an hour and a half, 2 hours, and people are watching this thinking it might have something to do with Trump, positive or negative. And there was just like craziness that was happening all over that town and getting into the city because of its approximation to New York City. But I did want to put this one up here. And
well, the thing is, you don't know the impact of a project. And so, you know, I think as artists, we put our work out there in this very vulnerable sort of way without really understanding what the impact may be. And so we have to be open to all of it. But that's the sort of amazing thing, is that, you know, it's all open for interpretation and conversation. And so that's really the most important thing.
I guess all of this is to say that there's endless ways that an individual can be important and an uber effective person in the art world without being one of the very few who gets up to where you are today, having a museum show at the MCA on the whole 4th floor. So I thought maybe we would close with another collaborative work, and we can take questions while it plays in the background.
Okay.
But essentially it's the Art on the Mart video, which was a video work done by you with Jeff Nolan as the digital manipulator and editor, that then plays on the Merchandise Mart in Chicago every night, twice a night throughout the run of your show. And it's over the scale of 2 full acres is that surface area. And so if y'all don't mind playing that, we can watch that while we take some questions here.
Oh, there's a question.
I think they're going to run it from here. But great. And then Audrey, I think, is it you who's going to bring questions to the floor?
Yes, hi. First of all, I just want to say thank you very much. It's really intimate conversation tonight. So let's open it up to our student body. Who has a question for me or Bob?
There's someone coming up.
Hello.
Hey.
I wanted to ask you about the experience of wearing sassy. I know that you said that it began or it felt like a form of protest, but I was wondering about the experience of wearing what that's like.
Cool. I'm just going to read what I think we hear because it's a little blurry. I think the question was, can you tell us a little bit about the experience of being in a sound suit?
Yes.
You know, the experience of being in a sound suit, it's really a lot, it's really big. You know, what I recommend is that when I'm working with a group of individuals is that, you know, we sort of sit in a room and, you know, I may give you a sound suit, but I will say, do not put it on, touch it, let's talk about it. You know, what do you think it's going to feel like on the body? Pick it up, feel it. And then I slowly allow you to get into parts of it, maybe just the pant and then movement within that and understanding the material that they're constructed out of and what is the properties that is allowed. It may be restricted in some cases, it may not be, but you know, it's really sort of taking the time to sort of explore and to get an understanding of the object and how it sort of changes the body, your sort of perspective. And then you slowly can start to commit yourself to the object. The most important thing is that I don't want it to wear you. I want you and the object to become one. So it's really about surrendering and giving yourself over to something else.
That's the word I was going to use too. The first time I put one on, you go into it really excited. And that's why you say to try to settle. But you go into it really excited. And really quickly, you realize all the things that are being taken away from you. Like you're full on sight. Your breath has to be different. There's weight and restricted movement and all those things, you know, because we're human beings, start to freak you out a little bit. And in fact, they can be a bit overwhelming until you settle. And then when you settle in it, you actually feel like an empowerment that comes from it, because all of a sudden it's like those limitations, when you realize that, oh, I really can see up through all of this mesh. It's just different.
Yeah.
And you calm your brain a little bit and you start to like think, how do I breathe in this suit? Then all of a sudden you start to really focus on what your body is doing. Instead of it like freaking out, you feel very present.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that there's a real magic to that, but it does take a moment.
It takes time, and otherwise you can just sort of like fall apart. And then I just have to settle you down and work slowly toward, again, an understanding of what is about to happen, because it's really a transformation that happens in that process.
Thank you so much. I really want to take a question.
Okay, so I actually have a two-part question from me and a friend. So the first part I basically want to ask is, you work with students in Detroit, but what impact did that have on your artistic development? And then part two is, would you ever work with elementary students?
I think.
Okay, go for it. Is that in?
What do you think?
Repeat what you think.
I don't know.
Oh my God, you have to say it one more time, because we're arguing over who heard what.
So the first part is, what was it like working with the students in Detroit?
Okay.
What impact did that have on you? And then the second part of the question is, would you ever work with elementary age students?
So specifically the School of the Arts in Detroit.
You know, working in Detroit was amazing. Again, you know, when you're working with young people, again, we're always thinking about, you know, what is the ask? And again, sort of structuring that experience structuring a experience for them to sort of be a part of. And so again, it's really sort of really talking through that and just really allowing them the freedom and the independence to be playful and to be involved. So it was really, really quite magnificent. They were great. We worked with the dance department, the music department. And so, the camaraderie amongst all of the groups was fantastic because they all sort of were invested in part of building something. And so I think that is really sort of the key thing, is that there is a project that concludes with an audience. And so they understand all of that. So that was really fabulous. And the other part of the question,
Would you ever work with elementary age students?
well, it's interesting with, it's interesting how like my sort of work is really becoming part of curricula within elementary school, high school, and I'm always getting like these amazing, amazing images of a class that created us their sound suits. And so, yes, why not?
We've had really wonderful experiences, either with museums that have a show creating curriculum, but also just artists art teachers taking it upon themselves to create, a project that happens over the course of their semester or a couple quarters. And what they're sharing is just like really lovely result.
Yeah, and pretty much with all the museum shows, there's the education sort of programming that is built into the exhibition. So, which really sort of supports a lot of local sort of schools in that sort of capacity. So we're very invested in, if schools don't have money to get to the museum, well, then we raise money in order for that to happen. So it's really sort of important that.
And another one of the examples toward that is, you saw that one performance image that we put up at the very end that we said was in Shreveport, Louisiana. Well, one of those social service agencies was an after-school program.
Oh, yeah.
And so it should be noted that over the course of that year, those kids were actually making lots of the objects that were in the sound suits. So while they weren't making the sound suit itself, they were making certain embellishments that they were able to see in the performance. And a couple of them actually participated on stage in that performance. But
and yeah, that was incorporated into the object. Yeah. So, we, always sort of thinking of sort of methods and ways in which kids can sort of get quick results, because I think that's also important too, that, they want to see something in front of them quickly in order to understand that they're making something and there is something that's starting to appear in front of them. So, yes.
Do we have time for one more, Audrey?
Come up closer to here.
Hi.
Hi.
Okay, so I have a bit of a two-part question for you. So, as an artist who has had to face discrimination and marginalization, it seems, making just art, art that moves us forward is, about, at least in part, digging into your own experience and cultural heritage. But what advice would you have for artists of privilege looking to decolonize their art? And what does it look like to be a good ally as an artist?
That's a big, amazing question. Did you hear all of it?
Yes.
A little rough. So tell me if I got this right. That your question at the end really comes down to people working toward using artwork to work toward equality and decolonization. But the real question is, when you don't have your own history to work from, like a privileged white male place, what kind of advice do you have for people who want to work down those lanes and do service toward those subjects?
Well, I think that's just it. It's about service, you know. You know, at the end of the day, I'm an artist with a civic responsibility. I mean, that's what sort of, that is my foundation. I am not necessarily, you know, the art career is sort of is moving in extraordinary ways, but I am really about inclusion and just really committed to having purpose within my practice. So to me, it's about sort of just getting outside of that familiar space and becoming part of community sort of engagements, investing in things that, you know, that matter to you. It all comes down to what matters to you and how do you want to sort of be of service at the end of the day. You know, I think when George Floyd happened, and I was at a town, Bob and his daughter were coming from a march.
Yep.
And I was coming back in town because I needed to get back in order to respond to that. And so I come in the house, he and Lulu are coming from the march, and they're like, oh, we just, you know, we're part of a march.
We felt very much like we just did something. We felt very much like we were part of some kind of progress.
And I said, well, if you're going to march about it, you've got to talk about it. And so he was like, whoa. And so that is the thing, is that, you know, we have to somehow sort of position ourselves in uncomfortable sort of spaces, places, and really become part of the fabric. You know, I came back here, I told Bob, it's like, we've got to take action right now. What are we going to do? So we just like literally, I was like literally losing my mind, but I knew that I needed to respond quite quickly. You know, we have this amazing building called Facility, and this was the platform that we could use to say something. You know, if we didn't have this, then we would have to like go through all this bureaucracy to try to get something to happen. So we decided to sort of create this project called Amends, which part of the project was inviting all of our closest friends to come and write about racism on the facade of the building. So we created this sort of idea of letters to the world. And so this was our sort of public outcry in that sort of moment. You want to take it from there?
Yeah. So the point behind all of that, or the impetus behind all of that, was the discomfort of the confrontation that he posed to me and Lulu. If you want to march about it, you got to talk about it. And just as many of the leaders in the city and our friends have a similar position, that they all feel as though they're not contributing to racism, or they're actually working toward the elimination of it in some way or form. But at the end of the day, they're all really afraid of saying the wrong thing. And so we pointedly asked them to come and make a public statement about it and not worry about making a mistake, because you can't worry about making a mistake. You have to make the mistake. Then you have to be ready to take the correction so that you learn from it. Because if we just avoid, so that we don't hurt a feeling or say the wrong thing and embarrass ourselves, and in fact, make things go backwards, the only way forward is to say it, get corrected, learn from it, and take the next step, and then it happens again. You know, it's about knowing that the reason you're doing it is way more important than anything that's already on your shoulders.
Mhm.
Great, thank you so very much. It's been a real pleasure to have both of you make involved with us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was fantastic. He did pretty good.
I want to thank you, Nick, for doing this with us, and thank you, Audrey, for the invitation. We're really excited to have been able to do it. Sorry it's over Zoom, but it actually worked pretty good. I hope you were able to hear us clearly and, you know, got stuff out of it. But it was fun for us, and
Yeah.
now I can go to sleep because that was really scary and exhausting.
And if you can, come to the show in Chicago at the MCA that opens in about
May 15th.
3 weeks, 4 weeks. So you know I'm going crazy right now in the studio. So
Thank you all.
Bye, thank you so much.
yeah.
Bye.
Thank you.